Hello everyone. Today, I'm going to be telling you some of the scariest stories from Israel and Palestine. These stories are based on real events, so be warned. They're not for the faint of heart. This region is known for its rich history and culture, but it also has its dark side. There are many stories of ghosts, demons, and other supernatural beings that are said to haunt the land. In this video, we will take a look at some of the most famous and terrifying horror stories from Israel and Palestine. We will also explore the history and folklore behind these stories and try to understand why they are so enduring. So, if you're looking for a good scare, join us on this journey into the heart of darkness. Here are some of the most haunting stories from Israel. The Ghost of the Old City. The Old City of Jerusalem is one of the most sacred and historic places in the world, but it is also said to be haunted by ghosts. One of the most famous ghost stories is that of the Ghost of the Old City. The story goes that the ghost is a young woman who was killed by her lover centuries ago. She is said to wander the streets of the old city at night, searching for her lover. Some people say that they have seen her walking down the streets, her face covered by a veil. Others say that they have heard her crying in the alleyways. There are many different versions of the story, but one of the most common is that the woman was a Jewish girl who fell in love with a Muslim man. Their families were forbidden to marry, so they met in secret. One night, they were discovered by the woman's family. Her father was so angry that he killed her. Another version of the story says that the woman was a Palestinian woman who was killed by an Israeli soldier. She is said to wander the streets of the old city, seeking revenge. Whether or not the ghost is real, the story is a reminder of the tragic history of the old city and the many people who have lost their lives there. The Jinn of the Jaffa Gate. The Jaffa Gate is one of the main gates into the old city of Jerusalem. It is also said to be haunted by a jinn, a type of demon in Islamic mythology. The story goes that the jinn is a powerful and evil creature that can take on any form. It is said to lurk in the shadows of the Jaffa Gate, waiting to attack anyone who passes by. One night, a young woman named Sarah was walking home from work. She had to pass through the Jaffa Gate to get home, but she had heard the stories about the jinn. She was scared, but she knew that she had to get home. As Sarah approached the gate, she felt a cold chill run down her spine. She looked over her shoulder and saw a dark figure standing in the shadows. The figure was tall and thin, with glowing red eyes. Sarah knew that it was the jinn. Sarah froze in fear. She didn't know what to do. She wanted to run, but she knew that the jinn would be faster than her. The jinn stepped out of the shadows and faced Sarah. It had a cruel smile on its face. The jinn said in a raspy voice,
"Hello, Sarah. I've been waiting for you."
Sarah didn't say anything. She was too scared to speak. The jinn said,
"Don't you know? You're not supposed to be here at night. This is my territory."
Sarah still didn't say anything. She just looked at the jinn with terror in her eyes. The jinn laughed.
"You're not very brave, are you, Sarah? But don't worry, I'll make it quick."
The jinn raised its hand and prepared to strike Sarah, but before it could land a blow, Sarah screamed. Her scream was so loud and piercing that it shattered the silence of the night. The jinn recoiled in surprise. Sarah took advantage of the opportunity and ran. She ran as fast as she could, and she didn't look back. Sarah ran all the way home. She didn't stop running until she was safely inside her house. She locked the door and windows and hid under her bed. Sarah was so scared that she didn't come out from under her bed until the next morning. When she finally did come out, she told her parents what had happened. Her parents were horrified. They knew about the jinn of the Jaffa Gate, and they were afraid that it would come back for Sarah. They took Sarah to the rabbi, and he blessed her and gave her a protective amulet to wear. He also told her to never go near the Jaffa Gate again, especially at night. Sarah has never gone near the Jaffa Gate since that night. She knows that the jinn is still out there, waiting for its next victim. But she also knows that she is safe, as long as she wears the rabbi's amulet. The story of the jinn of the Jaffa Gate is a cautionary tale. It warns people to be careful when they are walking alone at night, especially in dangerous places. It also teaches people that there are evil forces in the world, and that they should be prepared to protect themselves from them.
The Cave of the Hand.
The Cave of the Hand is a cave located in Har Homa, a Jewish neighborhood in Jerusalem. The cave is said to be haunted by the hand of a dead man. The story goes that the cave was once used as a burial place for Jewish people. One day, a man was buried in the cave. His hand was protruding from the ground, and it is said that it has remained there ever since. Some people say that the hand is a cursed object. Others say that it is a holy object that can grant miracles. Whatever the case may be, the Cave of the Hand is a popular pilgrimage site for Jewish people. Many people come to the cave to pray and to ask for the hand's blessing. The cursed village of Ein Had. Ein Had is a small village in Israel. It is a beautiful place, with artists and a picturesque setting. However, the village has a dark secret. It is said to be cursed by the ghost of a young woman who was murdered there centuries ago. The story goes that the woman, named Emily, was a beautiful young artist who was engaged to be married. However, she fell in love with another man, a fellow artist named Daniel. Her fiancé, a powerful and wealthy man named William, was so jealous that he had Daniel killed. Emily was devastated by Daniel's death. She blamed William and vowed to get revenge. One night, she lured William to the ruins of an old castle on the edge of the village. There, she killed him and buried his body in the ruins. Emily then returned to the village and continued to live her life. But she was never the same again. She became withdrawn and depressed, and she stopped painting. She was haunted by the memory of Daniel's death and by the guilt of killing William. One day, Emily disappeared without a trace. Some people say that she drowned herself in the river that flows through the village. Others say that she was taken by the ghost of Daniel. Whatever happened to Emily, her ghost is said to haunt the village to this day. She is said to appear to people at night, dressed in white and carrying a paintbrush. Some people say that she has attacked people, while others say that she simply wanders the village, crying. The ruins of the old castle where Emily killed William are now a popular tourist destination. But the locals warn visitors to be careful. They say that the castle is cursed and that anyone who enters it is at risk of being attacked by Emily's ghost. One day, a group of tourists decided to explore the ruins of the old castle. They had heard the stories about Emily's ghost, but they didn't believe them. They thought that the stories were just myths. The tourists entered the castle and began to explore. They walked through the ruins, marveling at the ancient architecture. But as they went deeper into the castle, they began to feel uneasy. The air was cold and damp, and they could hear strange noises all around them. Suddenly, the tourists heard a woman crying. They turned around and Emily's ghost standing behind them. She was dressed in white and carrying a paintbrush. The tourists were terrified. They turned and ran, but Emily's ghost was faster. She chased them through the castle, her cries echoing through the ruins. The tourists ran until they reached the exit. They burst out of the castle and into the sunlight. They were safe, but they were shaken by what they had experienced. The tourists never returned to the ruins of the old castle, but they never forgot Emily's ghost. They told their friends and family about what they had seen, and the stories of the cursed castle spread far and wide. To this day, the ruins of the old castle remain a popular tourist destination, but the locals still warn visitors to be careful. They say that the castle is cursed, and that anyone who enters it is at risk of being attacked by Emily's ghost. The ghost train of the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley is a fertile valley in northern Israel. It is also said to be haunted by a ghost train. The story goes that the train was carrying soldiers during the First World War. The train was ambushed by Turkish forces, and all of the British soldiers on board. The train is said to appear at night, traveling down the railway tracks. It is said that the train is filled with the ghosts of the soldiers who were killed. Some people say that the ghost train is simply a myth, but others say that they have seen it with their own eyes. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the railway tracks in the Jezreel Valley. They had heard the stories about the ghost train, but they didn't believe them. They thought that the stories were just myths. The teenagers walked down the railway tracks for hours. They were starting to get tired and bored, and they were about to turn back when they saw a light in the distance. The teenagers stopped and watched as the light got closer. They could see that it was a train, but it wasn't a normal train. It was the ghost train. The train was old and rusty, and it was covered in cobwebs. The windows were dark. The train was completely silent. The teenagers were terrified. They wanted to run away, but they couldn't move. They were frozen with fear. The train stopped in front of the teenagers. The doors opened, and the ghosts of the soldiers stepped out. The soldiers were all dressed in British uniforms. They were pale and gaunt, and their eyes were empty and soulless. The soldiers looked at the teenagers for a long moment. Then they turned and walked back onto the train. The doors closed, and the train started to move again. The teenagers watched as the train disappeared into the night. The teenagers never forgot what they saw that night. They told their friends and family about the ghost train, but no one believed them. But the teenagers knew what they had seen. They had seen the ghost train of the Jezreel Valley. The Haunted House of Jaffa. The Haunted House of Jaffa is a house located in the old city of Jaffa, Israel. The house is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman named Ruby who was murdered there in the 19th century. The story goes that Ruby was a beautiful young woman who was married to a wealthy merchant. She was having an affair with a young man named Albert, and her husband found out. The husband, whose name was Osama, was enraged. He killed Ruby and Albert in a fit of rage. Ruby's ghost is said to haunt the house to this day. She is said to appear to people at night, dressed in white and carrying a candelabrum. She is also said to make strange noises and move objects around. Some people say that Ruby's ghost is angry and vengeful. They say that she is seeking revenge for her murder. Others say that Ruby's ghost is sad and lonely. They say that she is trapped in the house and unable to move on. Whatever the reason, Ruby's ghost is a reminder of the tragedy that took place in the house many years ago. The Haunted House of Jaffa is a popular tourist destination, but it is also a place where people have reported experiencing strange and unexplained phenomena. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the Haunted House of Jaffa. They had heard the stories about Ruby's ghost, but they didn't believe them. They thought that the stories were just myths. The teenagers entered the house and began to explore. They walked through the dark and dusty rooms, marveling at the old furniture and antique decorations. But as they went deeper into the house, they began to feel uneasy. The air was cold and damp, and they could hear strange noises all around them. Suddenly, the teenagers heard a woman crying. They turned around and saw Ruby's ghost standing behind them. She was dressed in white and carrying a candelabrum. The teenagers were terrified. They turned and ran, but Ruby's ghost was faster. She chased them through the house, her cries echoing through the ruins. The teenagers ran until they reached the exit. They burst out of the house and into the sunlight. They were safe, but they were shaken by what they had experienced. The teenagers never returned to the Haunted House of Jaffa, but they never forgot Ruby's ghost. They told their friends and family about what they had seen, and the stories of the haunted house spread far and wide. To this day, the Haunted House of Jaffa remains a popular tourist destination, but the locals still warn visitors to be careful. They say that the house is cursed and that anyone who enters it is at risk of being attacked by Ruby's ghost. The Dybbuk of Nahariya. Esther was a young woman living in Nahariya, Israel, in the 1950s. She was a bright and vivacious young woman with a loving family and a promising future. But one day, everything changed. Esther began to exhibit strange behavior. She would speak in German, which she did not know, and she would often become violent and uncontrollable. Her family was deeply religious, and they were terrified. They didn't know what was happening to Esther, but they knew that something was wrong. Esther's family took her to see a doctor, but the doctor couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. The doctor suggested that Esther might be suffering from a mental illness, but Esther's family refused to believe it. They knew that Esther was a good and sane person, and they were determined to find out what was really wrong with her. Esther's family took her to see a rabbi. The rabbi examined Esther and determined that she was possessed by a Dybbuk. A Dybbuk is a restless spirit in Jewish mythology that possesses the body of a living person. The rabbi told Esther's family that he would perform an exorcism to cast the dybbuk out of Esther's body. The exorcism was a long and difficult process. The dybbuk was powerful, and it resisted the rabbi's attempts to cast it out. The rabbi chanted prayers and used holy symbols, but the dybbuk refused to leave Esther's body. During the exorcism, Esther's body would convulse and her face would contort into grotesque shapes. She would scream and curse in a language that no one could understand. The rabbi and Esther's family watched in horror as the dybbuk tormented Esther's body. After many days of struggle, the rabbi was finally able to cast the dybbuk out of Esther's body. Esther was free, but the ordeal had left her scarred. She was weak and exhausted, and her mind was traumatized. Esther never fully recovered from her experience. She became reclusive and withdrawn, and she was always afraid that the dybbuk would return. She died a few years later, still haunted by the memory of the dybbuk that had possessed her. The Demon of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is a salt lake located on the border between Israel and Jordan. It is known for its high salinity and its therapeutic properties. However, the Dead Sea is also said to be haunted by a demon. The story goes that the demon is a powerful and evil creature that can take on any form. It is said to lurk in the depths of the Dead Sea, waiting to attack anyone who swims too far out. Some people say that the demon is a fallen angel. Others say that it is a demon that was summoned by a magician centuries ago. One day, a group of teenagers decided to ignore the warnings and swim too far out in the Dead Sea. They were having fun, floating in the salty water, until one of the teenagers, a girl named Julia, saw something moving in the water below her. Julia screamed and pointed, but the other teenagers thought she was just joking around. But then, the creature emerged from the water. It was tall and gaunt, with pale skin and piercing red eyes. It had long, sharp claws and fangs, and its body was covered in scales. The teenagers were terrified. They tried to swim back to shore, but the creature was faster. It grabbed Julia and dragged her underwater. The other teenagers screamed and ran for shore. One of the teenagers was determined to save Julia. He grabbed a rock and threw it at the creature. The rock hit the creature in the head, and it released Julia. The teenager swam to Julia and helped her to shore. Julia was shaken, but she was alive. The teenagers were grateful for saving Julia, but they were also shaken by their experience. They knew that they had been lucky to escape with their lives. The Ghostly Hitchhiker of the Hebron Road. The Hebron Road is a highway that connects Jerusalem to Hebron in the West Bank. It is known for its dangerous driving conditions and its high rate of accidents. However, the Hebron Road is also said to be haunted by a ghost. The story goes that the ghost is a young woman who was killed in a car accident on the road. She is said to appear to drivers at night, asking for a ride. Some people say that the ghost is harmless. Others say that she is a malevolent spirit who leads drivers astray so that they can be killed in accidents. It was a cold and dark night. I was driving home from work on the Hebron Road, a highway that connects Jerusalem to Hebron in the West Bank. The road is known for its dangerous driving conditions and its high rate of accidents. I was driving carefully, but I was still a little nervous. I had heard stories about the ghost of the Hebron Road, a young woman who was killed in a car accident on a road. She is said to appear to drivers at night, asking for a ride. I had never seen the ghost myself, but I knew people who had. They said that she was a beautiful woman with long dark hair and pale skin. She would stand by the side of the road, waving her arms to get the attention of drivers. I was driving along when I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman, dressed in white. She was waving her arms. I hesitated for a moment. I remembered the stories about the ghost of the Hebron Road, but I also remembered that it was a cold and dark night, and the woman looked like she needed help. I pulled over to the side of the road and rolled down my window. "Can I help you?" I asked. The woman looked at me with her big, sad eyes. "I need a ride," she said. "My car broke down." I felt a chill run down my spine. But I didn't want to leave the woman stranded on the side of the road. "Get in," I said. The woman got in the car and closed the door. I started the car and drove away. We drove in silence for a while. I could feel the woman's eyes on me. "Where are you going?" I asked finally. "I'm going home," she said. "To Hebron." I nodded. Hebron was a long way from here. We drove for a long time. I started to feel tired. I looked at the woman in the passenger seat. She was still staring at me. "Are you okay?" I asked. The woman didn't answer. She just kept staring at me. I started to feel uneasy. I decided to take the next exit. I took the exit and pulled over to the side of the road. "I'm going to stop here," I said. "You can get out." The woman didn't move. She just kept staring at me. "Get out of the car," I said. The woman still didn't move. I reached over and opened the passenger door. I grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her out of the car. The woman screamed. Her scream was piercing and terrifying. I let go of her arm and stepped back. The woman stood there for a moment, staring at me. I watched her go. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I had just seen or experienced, but I knew that I would never forget it. I drove home as fast as I could. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The next day, I told my friends and family what had happened. They didn't believe me at first, but then they told me that they had heard stories about the ghost of the Hebron Road. I know what I saw that night, and I know that she will never forget me. The Cursed Cemetery of Safed. Safed is a city in northern Israel that is known for its mysticism and its Jewish Kabbalistic tradition. However, one of the most haunted places in Safed is the old cemetery. The cemetery is said to be cursed by the ghost of a rabbi who was buried there centuries ago. The story goes that the rabbi was a powerful Kabbalist who was known for his wisdom and his piety. However, he was also known for his arrogance. One day, the rabbi was challenged to a debate by a demon. The rabbi agreed to the debate, but he was defeated by the demon. As punishment for his defeat, the rabbi was cursed by the demon. The demon cursed the rabbi to wander the earth as a ghost for all eternity. The rabbi's ghost is said to haunt the old cemetery in Safed. He is said to appear to people at night, dressed in white. He is also said to make strange noises and move objects around. Some people say that the rabbi's ghost is harmless. Others say that he is a malevolent spirit who seeks revenge on those who have wronged him. Whatever the case may be, the rabbi's ghost is a feared and respected figure in Safed. People are often warned not to go to the old cemetery at night, for fear of encountering the ghost. As we wrap up our Israeli horror tales, get ready to cross over into the world of Palestine's spine-tingling stories. The Ghost of the Olive Grove. In the heart of Palestine, there is an olive grove that is said to be haunted. The grove is old and gnarled, with trees that have stood for centuries. The air is always cool and damp, and there is a sense of unease that hangs over the place. The story goes that the ghost of a young woman named Fatima inhabits the olive grove. Fatima was a beautiful and kind woman who was loved by everyone in her village. One day she was walking through the olive grove when she was attacked by a group of bandits. They killed her and left her body in the grove. Fatima's ghost is said to wander the olive grove at night, searching for her killers. She is said to be vengeful, and anyone who enters the grove after dark is at risk of being attacked. One day, a group of young people decided to explore the olive grove at night. They thought it was just a campfire tale. The young people entered the olive grove and began to walk down the winding paths. As they walked deeper into the grove, the young people began to feel uneasy. They had the sense that they were being watched. They stopped and looked around, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly they heard a noise. It was a low, moaning sound. The young people looked at each other in fear. They knew that it was the ghost of Fatima. The ghost appeared before them. She was dressed in white, and her long hair was flowing in the wind. Her face was pale, and her eyes were empty. The young people screamed and ran. They ran as fast as they could, but the ghost was faster. She chased them through the olive grove, her moaning echoing through the trees. The young people ran until they reached the edge of the grove. They burst out of the trees and into the safety of the village. The young people were never the same after that night. They were traumatized by their encounter with the ghost of Fatima. They never went back to the olive grove again. The olive grove is still there, and the ghost of Fatima is still said to wander its paths at night. Anyone who enters the grove after dark is at risk of being attacked. The Haunted Hospital of Jericho. The Haunted Hospital of Jericho is an abandoned hospital located in the old city of Palestine. The hospital was built in the 19th century, but it was closed down in the 1970s due to safety concerns. The hospital is said to be haunted by the ghosts of the patients who died there. Many of the patients were victims of war or disease, and their spirits are said to be restless. Some people say that the ghosts of the hospital are malevolent. They say that the ghosts attack people who enter the hospital at night. Others say that the ghosts are simply lost and confused. They say that the ghosts are searching for a way to move on to the afterlife. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the haunted hospital of Jericho. They had heard the stories about the ghosts, but they didn't believe them. They thought it was just a campfire tale. The teenagers entered the hospital and began to walk through the abandoned corridors. The air was cold and damp, and the only sound was the echo of their own footsteps. As they walked deeper into the hospital, the teenagers began to feel uneasy. They had the sense that they were being watched. They stopped and looked around, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly, they heard a noise. The teenagers looked at each other in fear. They knew that it was the ghosts of the hospital. The ghosts appeared before them. They were dressed in hospital gowns, and their skin was covered in sores. The teenagers screamed and ran. The ghosts chased them through the hospital, their moaning echoing through the corridors. The teenagers ran until they reached the exit. They never went back to the hospital again. The Cursed Village of Beit Saur. Beit Saur is a small village located near Bethlehem. The village is said to be cursed, and it is home to many strange and unexplained phenomena. Some people say that the curse on Beit Saur was placed by a witch. Whatever the reason for the curse, it is said to be very powerful. Many people who have visited Beit Saur have reported strange experiences, such as seeing ghosts, hearing strange noises, and feeling a sense of unease. One day, a group of tourists decided to visit Beit Saur. They had heard the stories about the curse, but they didn't believe them. The tourists arrived in Beit Saur and began to explore the village. They walked through the narrow streets and admired the old stone buildings. As they walked, the tourists began to feel uneasy. They stopped and looked around, but they couldn't see anything. The tourists looked at each other in fear. The tourists screamed and ran. The ghosts chased them through the village, their moaning echoing through the streets. The tourists ran until they reached the edge of the village. They burst out of the village and into the safety of the highway. They never went back to the village again. The Haunted Ruins of Sebastia. Sebastia is an ancient city located in the West Bank. The city is known for its well-preserved Roman ruins. However, the ruins of Sebastia are also said to be haunted. The story goes that the ruins are haunted by the spirits of the people who were killed there during the Roman occupation. Many of the people who were killed were Christians, and their spirits are said to be restless. Some people say that the ghosts of Sebastia are malevolent. They say that the ghosts attack people who visit the ruins at night. The ghosts are searching for a way to move on to the afterlife. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the ruins of Sebastia. They had heard the stories about the ghosts, but they didn't believe them. The teenagers entered the ruins and began to walk through the ancient streets. The air was cold and damp, and the only sound was the echo of their own footsteps. As they walked deeper into the ruins, the teenagers began to feel uneasy. Suddenly, they heard a noise. It was a low moaning sound. The teenagers looked at each other in fear. They knew that it was the ghosts of Sebastia. They were dressed in white and their skin was covered in sores. The teenagers screamed and ran. They ran as fast as they could, but the ghosts were faster. The ghosts chased them through the ruins, their moaning echoing through the streets. They burst out of the ruins and into the safety of the night. The teenagers were never the same after that night. They were traumatized by their encounter with the ghosts of Sebastia. They never went back to the ruins again. The country has a long and rich history, and it is no wonder that there are so many stories about ghosts, demons, and other supernatural beings. If you are ever visiting Palestine, be sure to be respectful of the local culture and traditions. And be careful not to wander off by yourself, especially at night. You never know what you might encounter. The Jinn of the Jerusalem Forest. On the outskirts of the bustling city of Jerusalem lies a dense, ancient forest. The forest is shrouded in mystery and folklore, and many locals believe it to be haunted by jinn, malevolent supernatural creatures from Islamic mythology. One day, a group of carefree teenagers decided to explore the forest, despite the warnings of their elders. They were drawn by its allure of mystery and adventure, and they dismissed the stories of jinn as nothing more than campfire tales. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder and the shadows seemed to lengthen. They could hear strange noises echoing through the trees, but they couldn't pinpoint their source. Suddenly, one of the teenagers tripped and fell. As she lay on the ground, she felt a cold hand grip her ankle. She screamed in terror, and her friends rushed to her side. They couldn't see anything in the darkness, but they could hear a low, guttural growl. The teenagers backed away slowly, their hearts pounding in their chests. Then they saw it. A pair of glowing red eyes emerged from the shadows. The creature was tall and slender, with sharp claws and fangs. Its skin was covered in dark scales, and its eyes burned with hatred. The jinn had found them. The teenagers turned and ran. It chased them through the forest, its growls echoing through the trees. The teenagers stumbled and fell, but they didn't dare stop running. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest and burst out into the safety of the open. The jinn stopped at the edge of the forest, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. The teenagers collapsed on the ground, exhausted and terrified. They had survived their encounter with the jinn, but they would never forget the horror they had witnessed that day. The Haunted Mosque of Ramallah. The Haunted Mosque of Ramallah is an old mosque located in the city of Ramallah. The mosque is said to be haunted by the ghost of a man named Kasasa. Kasasa was a devout Muslim who prayed at the mosque every day. One day, Kasasa was praying at the mosque when he was attacked by a group of bandits. The bandits killed Kasasa and stole all of the mosque's valuables. Kasasa's ghost is said to haunt the mosque to this day. He is said to appear to people at night, and he is said to make strange noises and move objects around. Some people say that Kasasa's ghost is seeking revenge for his death, while others say that he is simply lost and confused. One night, a group of young people decided to explore the haunted mosque of Ramallah. They had heard the stories about Kasasa's ghost, but they didn't believe them. They thought it was just a campfire tale. The young people entered the mosque and began to walk through the dark and dusty rooms. They could hear the wind whistling through the broken windows, and they could feel the cold air on their skin. As they walked deeper into the mosque, they had the sense that they were being watched. They stopped and looked around, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly, they heard a sound of screaming. Also, the objects started moving. The young people looked at each other in fear. They knew that it was the ghost of Kasasa. The young people screamed and ran until they reached the exit. They burst out of the mosque and into the safety of the night. They never went back to the haunted mosque of Ramallah again. The cursed village of Ein-Gedi. Ein-Gedi is a small village located in the West Bank. The village is known for its beautiful oasis and its hot springs. However, the village is also said to be cursed. The story goes that the village was cursed by a witch centuries ago. The witch was angry at the villagers for driving her out of the village, so she cursed them to suffer for all eternity. The people of Ein-Gedi have suffered many hardships over the centuries. The village has been plagued by droughts, floods, and earthquakes. Many people believe that these hardships are the result of the witch's curse. One day, a group of tourists decided to visit Ein-Gedi. They had heard the stories about the curse, but they didn't believe them. They thought it was just a campfire tale. The tourists arrived in En-Gedi and began to explore the village. They visited the oasis and swam in the hot springs. They didn't notice anything strange at first. But then, as the sun began to set, the tourists began to feel uneasy. They stopped and looked around, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly, they heard a low growling sound. A low growl filled the air and shocked the tourists. The tourists ran back to their hotel as fast as they could. They locked themselves in their rooms and didn't come out until the next morning. The tourists left En-Gedi the next day. They were too scared to stay in the cursed village any longer.
The Graveyard of the Martyrs.
The Graveyard of the Martyrs is located in the city of Ramallah. It is the final resting place of many Palestinians who have been killed in the conflict with Israel. According to legend, the graveyard is haunted by the spirits of the martyrs. People who have visited the graveyard have reported seeing apparitions, hearing strange noises, and feeling a sense of sadness and sorrow. One story tells of a group of teenagers who went to the graveyard at night to tell ghost stories. They sat around a bonfire and told stories until late into the night. As they were about to leave, they heard a noise behind them. The apparitions were the spirits of the martyrs, and they were dressed in white robes. The teenagers were so frightened that they ran away. They never went back to the graveyard of the martyrs again. The Haunted Tunnel. In the Palestinian city of Gaza, there is an abandoned tunnel that is said to be haunted. The tunnel was built during World War II, and it was used by the British Army to transport supplies. After the war, the tunnel was abandoned and fell into disrepair. Today, it is a popular spot for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. One day, a group of Palestinian teenagers decided to explore the haunted tunnel. They had heard the stories about the ghosts, but they didn't believe them. The teenagers entered the tunnel and began to walk down it. It was dark and damp, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. As they walked deeper into the tunnel, the teenagers began to hear strange noises. They heard whispers and laughter, and they felt cold spots on their skin. The teenagers started to get scared, but they kept going. They wanted to see if the stories about the ghosts were true. Suddenly, one of the teenagers tripped and fell. He screamed as he fell down a hole in the ground. The other teenagers rushed to help him, but they couldn't see him. They called out to him, but he didn't answer. The teenagers were terrified. They didn't know what had happened to their friend. The teenagers ran out of the tunnel as fast as they could. They never went back. The teenagers told everyone what had happened, but no one believed them. They said that the teenagers were just trying to scare each other. But the teenagers knew what they had seen. They knew that the haunted tunnel was real. The Whispering Woman of Jenin. The city of Jenin in the Palestinian West Bank is home to a woman who is said to whisper to people at night. She is known as the Whispering Woman of Jenin. The Whispering Woman was once a beautiful young woman who was murdered by her jealous husband. Her spirit is said to still haunt the city, and she whispers to people at night to warn them of danger or to tell them secrets. There are many stories about people who have been visited by the Whispering Woman. Some people say that she has warned them of accidents or crimes that were about to happen. Others say that she has told them secrets about their past or their future. One story tells of a young man who was walking home from work late one night when he heard a woman whispering to him. He turned around, but he couldn't see anyone. The woman continued to whisper to him, telling him to turn around and go back the way he came. The young man was scared, but he didn't turn around. He knew that he had to get home. The woman kept whispering to him, and her voice grew louder and louder. The young man was so scared that he started to run. He ran all the way home, and he didn't stop until he was inside his house, and the door was locked behind him. The young man never saw the Whispering Woman, but he knew that she was real. He knew that she had saved his life. The Whispering Woman of Jenin is a popular figure in Palestinian folklore. She is seen as a protector and a guardian. People who have been visited by her often feel grateful for her help. But the Whispering Woman can also be scary. She is a reminder that there are things in the world that we don't understand. She is a reminder that there are forces at work beyond our control. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed these scary stories from Israel and Palestine. If you did, Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more horror content. Let us know if you want more horror stories from around the world. We are planning some more spooky content from Japan, Korea, China, and many other countries. If you have any scary stories from your own culture, please share them in the comments below. I hope you have a good night. And don't forget to lock your doors.